We're going to pull everything we've done together in this video. So, as I tell you the following story, I'd like you to think, could you identify a timeline? Could you distill one idea from the story? And could you think about areas where we might make better use of suspense? Because I think it could be better. So let's have a look. So this is an email that I sent out to my list about 3 years ago now. So I think there's elements that are good, but I think it could be improved. So it starts off. We pulled up at a beautiful pink house in the Colombian countryside. I climbed off the back of the motorbike. My driver climbs off too. After a few brief holas, he hands me his helmet, hands me his jacket, gives me the key, and asks me what time I'm going to be back. So I then loop back and explain the backstory. So in 2009, I spent 6 weeks visiting Colombia. I was visiting San Agustin. There were pre-Columbian burial sites to visit, and you need transport to get between them. My travelling companion Jenny disappeared off on a horse. I view horses as animals to be admired but not ridden, so instead, in my finest traveller's Spanish, I arranged for a motorbike taxi driver to drive me around for the afternoon. He picked me up from my hotel, and I climbed on the back of the bike. "Vamos a mi casa," he says. We go to my house. I nodded. I didn't really understand why, but off we went. We arrived at his house. The midday sun was scorching, and like a scene from The Godfather, his extended family were sitting outside. The helmet, jacket and key were passed over to me. In broken Spanish, I asked how the bike works. He looked worried and explained. 1 gear down, 5 up, back brake, front brake, clutch. We quickly established I had no idea how to ride a motorcycle. In the end, I paid him an extra $30 to drive me around for the afternoon. If that isn't the ultimate breakdown in communication, I don't know what is. So, my one idea from that was obviously poor communication, because that's where I ended the story. It was about the breakdown in communication. The very last thing I've said is, if that isn't the ultimate breakdown in communication, I don't know what is. So that's very deliberate, because by me saying that, you think that the story is about a breakdown in communication. But there's something else interesting about this story. When we map it out to the timeline, the way that I've told the story isn't chronological. I've actually started the story here. I've started the story in the middle of the drama. Then I've looped back to describe the context. So this is something to think about when you're creating your nurture emails. Because every story you tell in your nurture emails has to have some degree of context. You have to. So in this email, the context is that I was in Colombia, I was visiting San Agustin, and I needed transport. That was the context. But I didn't start there. I started in the drama. And that's actually a really useful technique. And if you think about most films don't start with the backstory. Most movies will throw you into the middle of the drama first to draw you into the film. Then they'll look back and explain the backstory. And you can do exactly the same thing with your nurture emails. It only requires a paragraph. It doesn't require a lot of space, but it can be quite powerful. So we've got our one idea. We've got our timeline. So the timeline is, I was picked up, which was good. We arrived at his house, which is worrying. I got the keys, which for a brief moment was good. Then I stole the bike. I explained that I couldn't ride it, and eventually he drove, and we ended up on our one idea. There isn't really any suspense in this story. I think if I was writing this story again, I would add in a bit of suspense, especially when his family are watching me try to ride the bike. And I haven't really talked about me stalling the bike. And I think here would be a great opportunity to add some suspense. And I think that I didn't do that initially, because when I first wrote this story, I didn't have this technique. I didn't map it out to the timeline. I didn't really understand suspense. So hopefully you're starting to see how we can map out any story and identify where we might be able to improve it. So what have we covered in the last 7 days? Because I think we've covered quite a lot. We've covered the timeline. We've covered the empathy zone, so how to select stories. We've covered the one idea, so the one idea being how you link a story to your content. And we've discussed suspense and how to keep people reading. I'd like to think that you could take these ideas and apply them to any nurture email that you write. Something that's interesting for me at the moment is I'm actually reading classical music for dummies. My wife Lindsay says that I'm trying to break out of a 14-year chav phase because I quite like electronic dance music. So I'm reading classical music for dummies. And this page just summed up exactly what I was trying to get across with this course. So they're talking about how classical music composers keep your attention with variety and pacing. So I'll just read this out. So one technique that achieves this effect is variety. If the composer includes in a piece a variety of musical ideas or dynamics, he's much more likely to keep your interest. In this way, a great piece of music is like a great movie. An explosion near the beginning gets your attention. But if you see a movie with explosions every minute for 2 hours, like Independence Day, you'll notice how each explosion becomes successively less interesting, until finally you don't even notice them anymore. You need variety, something contrasting and different between explosions. It's the same in classical music, and it's the same in your nurture emails. You have to have contrast. And the only way to see that contrast is on the timeline. In a movie, one explosion can be thrilling if it's approached correctly, with a suspenseful build-up. Effective composers know how to use dramatic pacing too. Their music seems to build up suspense as it approaches the climax. So all of the elements that we've been talking about in the last 7 days not only work in nurture emails, they also work in classical music. And if you think about it, a piece of classical music essentially is a story, especially a shorter piece like a sonata. It's really a story, but we've got contrast, we've got suspense as you build up to a big climax. And actually a good piece of classical music generally has one idea that it's trying to convey to you. If you listen to Beethoven's Symphony Number 5, you'll get a huge impression of the frustration that Beethoven was feeling about going deaf. And it's the same with your stories, that there has to be a one idea, because the one idea is what provides the parameters for your story, and it tells you where to end the story. I hope you found this course helpful. I would like to know what you think. And I do periodically run work groups, so if you'd like to actively improve your storytelling technique, and if you'd like to write more effective nurture emails in-house, then please keep an eye out for upcoming work groups. So a work group is typically 5 or 6 students, and we'll work through together the principles that we talked about in this course, but we'll go through it in detail, and we'll point out each of us mistakes. And that's how we learn, is by having our mistakes pointed out to us. So if this has been interesting and you'd like to take part in that, please keep an eye out for upcoming work groups. Do feel free to email me. My email address is robd@confusionclinic.com, or you can reply to any of the emails in this series and they'll also come through to me.